Hello everyone, and you already know some things about me, such as the way I draw, what I like to draw, the creative endeavors that I have, and some of my goals when it comes to art. But you don't know a whole lot about my life growing up, my childhood, or much about some other things and other hobbies that I have. So I was going to tell you a little bit about that. So I'm going to start from the beginning, which would be back in 1990 when I was born. I grew up in Florida. I was a middle child. I had one brother, one sister. My brother was 5 years older than me, and my sister 3 years younger. Growing up, I had a really poor family. We didn't have much money at all. Most of the time, the only time I got to eat really was in school, and at times I would even fail classes on purpose so that I could go to summer school to eat. But things were a struggle, and through all that struggle, I've found that it has only strengthened me to be a better person. And when I think back on a lot of it, I have a hard time remembering it, but I'm getting to the point where I can remember more of it. And so I remember, if I go back, when I was in kindergarten, there was a time that I went to school and I had this shirt that it was like a blue shirt that had dinosaurs on it and everything. And I remember sitting in class and the teacher kept getting mad at me because I would keep pushing the button on it. It lit up and made dinosaur sounds. And I had to go home that day, and the teacher told me that I had to wear a different shirt, than that I couldn't wear it because it was distracting class and it was making the other students laugh and not pay attention. And so I had wore a different shirt to school after that, but I remember when I first started school, I always asked a lot of questions. I always wanted to know why this, why that, why does this work that way, why is the universe this way? And a lot of times it would actually get me in trouble because there would be something that they were teaching us, and it would be a specific topic and we had to learn it that way, and that's what we were told to learn. And I remember I'd always ask the teacher, why this? We'd be in a science class or English or math, and I'd constantly keep asking the teacher, why are we learning this math? Why are we doing these social studies and everything else? And the teacher would tell us, it's so that when you go to college or after high school that you can use these to help you in your career or job. And from a young age, I was always asking questions that I find that people weren't asking until they were 10 years after this, till they're 16 or 18. And I always had a huge interest in science and nature and all that. A little bit in biology, but mostly just in science, because when I was really young, I wanted to be either an astrophysicist or an architect. And so as I was going through school, I would always ask questions. I had a lot of interest in the things. And I remember I had a little sketchbook I would take with me, and I would go out and sketch bugs and draw the leaves and the trees and whatever is around me. Although I was only 6 years old, 7 years old, so it wasn't like my skill was that great or anything yet. But I kept practicing, and I remember I would take a piece of paper with me or a little sketchbook or something. It was mostly the paper I had was really cheap printer paper. It's that printer paper you can get in like the big stacks where there's like 1,000 or 500 sheets of paper, and I would just use those to draw on because it was cheap. We didn't have much money. Or sometimes at school I would take some of the paper. I'd ask the teacher if they had any spare paper, and I would use that. And I remember I would take it with me on the bus, and I would draw all these little stick figures, like it was a stick figure battle, and I would draw dinosaurs and all that. And I was trying to develop my skill of drawing things three-dimensionally. I would just draw everything flat, and I remember I would show the other kids in the bus what I was drawing, and some of them, well, a lot of them would laugh at it, but then there was some that was really interested, and they'd sit down and watch me draw stick figures and buildings and houses and all that stuff. And this is when I lived in Center Hill, Florida, when I was doing this a lot as well. But at this time I was about between the age of 8 to the age of 10 or 11, because when I was 11 years old, I think, that's when I moved from Center Hill, Florida to Bushnell, Florida. And I lived in Center Hill 2 times. I lived there when I was really young. It was around when I was like maybe 4, I think. I think I was 4 maybe. I know I lived there twice. I think it was when I was like 4 or 7. And then later on I moved, and then I moved back to Center Hill when I was about 9. So there's like a year period between moving. But anyways, I remember this was when I was about 8 or 9 years old. I was on the bus, and this was in Center Hill, Florida, and it was quite a long bus ride to the school, because where I lived was out in the middle of nowhere. And I would go to the bus stop, and I had to be there at about 7 in the morning, and there was always this beautiful sunrise, because I would look out in the field in front of me, and there'd be a couple of ponds there, some pine trees and everything, and the cows would be mooing and all that stuff. And I remember I would stand there and think about life and wonder, how are things going to be? Is it going to just always be a struggle like this? And at the time I thought that, maybe things aren't going to get better, but I always used drawing as the outlet, as something that helped me escape all of that. And so I would always bring paper with me to school, and I would draw on the bus, and I tried to draw in school. I'd always doodle things on the paper, and I had really good grades up until about middle school, and that's when I started having a bit of a struggle with passing classes. And I remember riding on the bus, and there was this other kid that showed interest in what I was drawing, and I think his name was Daniel, and then there was this other kid, his name was Philip. And at one point I remember we were at the library, and they both did a drawing of like a car, and they asked me which one that I think is better. And the one kid, he drew pretty good, and the other one wasn't really that great, but I didn't want to tell him that. I didn't want to make him feel bad. So I told him that both of them did really good. And so then it was kind of something that I mostly kept to myself as far as my hobbies and whatnot. I mean, a lot of students knew that I did a lot of drawing, but outside of that, not really much of anybody knew. Me and my mom knew, and my grandmother and grandpa did, but I had good grades, and I didn't really have any trouble with my classes until I got to about middle school, like I said. And I started taking, I think it was art classes in 8th grade, 9th grade. That's when I first had some art classes. And to me, my goal wasn't to just be really good in all this. It was just to have fun. And as I've gotten older now, sometimes when I'm feeling like I'm not getting anywhere with something, I have to realize that I should just do it for the fun of drawing, for the enjoyment of just being creative and making things. And I know that over time we sometimes lose that creativity. We lose that ability to just make things and to just create rather than worrying so much about trying to make everything perfect. And so as the years went by, I knew that I was improving, but that wasn't really a goal. Like I said, I just kept having fun. But back to the bus ride and at the bus stop, like I said, the sun was rising and I could see the sunrise out there. And it looked so nice. Where I live now, I live in an upstairs apartment, and this is the most sun I get on this side of my apartment. The other side, I have a window where the sun sets there, but I do miss living out, kind of in the country, seeing all the scenic sunsets and sunrises and all that, and not having to be, bothered by lots of noise and everything like that. I like to socialize a little bit now and then, but I don't like it when it's a constant thing, because I've always been more of an introverted person, and drawing was that thing that I would always escape to. And when I'm in huge groups of people talking a whole bunch, I kind of get drained, and so to recover, it's like I have to go isolate myself, do some drawing and think about things. And so the ride to school was really long, and I had to get up I got up at like 6 in the morning. I had to be at the bus stop at 7, and I would, like I said, I'd stand there and think about life. I would look at the sunrise, and I would make moving sounds back to the cows, and I'd look, and sometimes birds would fly over, and depending on the time of the year, if they're migrating and everything, I see a lot more birds flying across the sky. And the weather there, it didn't get freezing cold, but when you're used to the heat all the time, it's gonna feel cold when it gets in the 30s, especially when you're living down there in Florida. And I remember a couple of times the bus driver actually would forget to pick me up somehow. I was like, how could they forget to pick me up? I remember one day the bus driver went by, and they were, I don't know what the speed limit, it must have been like 55 or something like that. We were kind of out in the middle of nowhere, really. We were probably about, I would say, 5 miles away from town or so. Our closest neighbor was about a mile away, a little bit more than a mile. Maybe, it might have been 2 miles. I think town might have been 10 miles away, actually, now that I think about it. And so we kind of lived out in the middle of nowhere, and I liked that I could just go outside and, draw things and not be bothered by people, and to not be worried about them asking so many questions. What's he doing out there? What's going on? And because as I got older, like I said, I thought that this is how life was supposed to be. I thought it was supposed to be a struggle. I thought that everybody dealt with these things. And so as I got older, then I realized that what was happening wasn't actually normal. It wasn't the regular or average life. And as I was getting older, I realized that, and I thought to myself, like, what is going on? And so from an early age, I always started doing drawing, and it was something I just always enjoyed, to escape things around me, like I said. And I think that because a lot of the bad things that happened to me, a lot of emotional and physical abuse, that's when I started having trouble in middle school, and all throughout high school. I had a hard time passing any classes. I would fail the same math class over and over. And when I was in elementary and middle school, I was in advanced classes. I was in middle school. I was taking advanced honors classes and all that. And then it was like out of nowhere, 8th grade, I started to really struggle. But from an early age, school was easy for me. I enjoyed learning. I could remember things really well. I didn't have much of a problem with taking tests, doing homework, or any of that. So I know that when I started, it was easy, and it's going to get more difficult as you progress, but it was easy in that I was doing advanced classes at a younger age. It was a higher level than what I was doing as I got older. And so I knew something was wrong there. And I always had an interest in science and learning about all that. And when I lived pretty much out in the middle of nowhere in Center Hill, Florida, I would always go around, look at the bugs. I would like collect ants and spiders and everything. And I would put them in little jars. It was like these big pickle jars it would have. And because I always like eating pickles, dill pickles. And after I was done eating them, I would take the jar, I would poke holes in the top of it so that the spider or bugs or whatever it is that's in there could breathe. And I would go around and collect bugs and look at them and do sketches of them. And then sometimes I would go to the library. And going to the library to me was really exciting because I didn't really get to go much of anywhere. I went to school, I went home, and that was it. Sometimes I would go to my grandparents, but they lived about a 4-hour drive away, so we would go there maybe only a few times a year, not that often. And I remember going to the library and I'd read all these books and look at the different stuff about science and nature in them, and I was really fascinated at the time with nature, like insects, bugs, and animals. And I would always watch Animal Planet on TV, and I know I had a fascination with Dragon Ball Z too, from an early age. And so I would go to the library, I would look at all these books and look at things. And at the time, the internet wasn't really as advanced as it is today. You didn't have the ability to search things like you do now. And the internet was so slow back then. I remember I would go to use the computer and it just took a long time for anything to load. So it took so long that by the time it was done loading, my mind was already thinking about other things. And so I was just better off looking up things in the books and reading it. And I remember there would be these huge books that had big pictures in them of nature and dinosaurs and animals and all that. And I would look at them and it'd give me ideas about something to draw. And I would go home and draw some kind of hybrid between a dinosaur and some different animal. And it's pretty creative. I mean, like I said, I wasn't worried about trying to make things perfect or trying to make things look how other things look or what other people make. I was just being creative and having fun. And sometimes I would take some of the books home, and there was many times that I would ask the library teacher if I could keep it longer, because I would want to read through it and look at everything several times before I would return it. And a couple of times the library teacher they weren't happy about that. And so I would spend a lot of time at the library reading things, and occasionally my mother would take me to the local library, and I would go there and read things. And I remember the first time when I got a library card and I started going there, how excited I was. It was like, it was this escape from what was going on at home, and I could explore things, learn things, and look at things in these books and be creative. And I wouldn't have the stress of everything that was going on at home. And those were some really good times. I mean, I had a lot of bad stuff happening, but through all the bad things that were happening, it has made the good things that were happening in life that much better. And let me take a sip of this first. It was really hot when I microwaved it, so I'm taking more sips here as it cools down. It's black tea. And I started reading from a really young age. Like I said, my reading level and everything was pretty advanced, and so instead of having to have people read things to me when I was really young, I would just go and read it myself. And I was just always fascinated with it. And now, as you get older, when you become, an adult, you've got all these other responsibilities and bills and things that you have to do. You don't have as much freedom to do a lot of that. And income to me was never the goal of life, because from an early start, I never really had much money. The happiness that I found in life wasn't from the validation of others. It wasn't from external things such as fame, status, wealth, or any of those. It came from within myself. The discovery of the interests and the hobbies that I had, and just being creative, having fun in the moment. And at the time it seemed like life was just so long. Here I'm 8 years old, and you think, I'm 8, and you think to yourself, when you're 8 years old, you see somebody that's 20 and you think they're like really old. And now I'm 28, and I see people that are double my age, and it doesn't seem like people are old until they're twice my age, but it's kind of just funny when you think about it from that perspective. But yeah, I had a good time going to the library and all that, and drawing and sketching and everything. And to this day, I've always just really enjoyed drawing and using that as something to help me not worry about the things around me. And no matter what's going on in life, I know that I always have that there to help me, to keep being creative and to just have fun, and to know that creativity is still there, and that I still have that through everything I've gone through. And I think about things that have happened in my childhood, and to know that my perspective might have changed on things, but who I truly am deep down inside has always really been there.